Hello, seventh graders. You guessed it. Another Ed puzzle video. Yours truly, Miss Bedell. So today, our learning target is I can determine an author's POV by identifying features in different parts of the Point Elliot Treaty. So we're going to be thinking about how does each part of the treaty serve either the native perspective and needs or the U.S. government and white settlers' needs. So we're going to start just looking over the standard for this week that we're going to be looking at. We're going to review types of source and thinking about perspective. And then we're going to read sections of the Point Elliot Treaty and identify which parts serve native tribal members versus the U.S. government and white settlers, as I just said. So the standard we've got, where do I want to put? That works. The main task is to identify aspects of a text that reveal an author's point of view, POV, or purpose. For example, loaded language, inclusion or avoidance of particular facts. So point of view and purpose, I think you might have been working on with Mr. Allen in ELA. So hopefully this doesn't feel too unfamiliar. But the actual steps of the rubric might be different than in ELA. They might also be the same. Let me know if these are the same or different. So for beginning, to get a 1, you are distinguishing your own opinion from that of the author of the text. So you're able to tell what the topic is. You might be able to explain your own opinion and the author's opinion and compare and contrast between the two. To get a 2, you're going to be looking at firsthand versus secondhand accounts. So this is where we get primary and secondary sources. We're going to review that in just a minute and think about the differences in focus and the information provided. Identifying the topic, knowing if it's firsthand or secondhand, primary or secondary, and looking at the similarities and differences. Then to get a 3, you're able to identify aspects of a text that reveal an author's point of view or purpose. So knowing sort of the generally accepted facts, identifying the topic, identifying the author's attitude towards the topic or purpose, and thinking about what aspects of the text, loaded language, inclusion or avoidance of particular facts and details, reveals the author's point of view or purpose. Then to get a 4, it is similar to central idea in that you're going to be summarizing, thinking about how an author treats a topic and what of their background or goals might influence their point of view or purpose. So explaining why the author might hold that point of view, and thinking about other previously identified aspects to craft a summarizing statement. So to be totally honest, we might not get through this whole rubric this week. There's a lot in this, and I want to get as much into it as we can, but that might mean that we are really focusing on the first 2 sections of the rubric, and when we get back from break, we're practicing 3 and 4. I don't want to rush this. I learned a lot from our lesson yesterday about, thinking about primary versus secondary and figuring out perspective. And I think that this is something that practicing and taking our time through it is really going to benefit us. So if you're looking at this, you're listening to me now and you're like, this is a lot. We're gonna just keep practicing. And I don't want it to feel like we're rushing through this skill before we leave for break for the sake of doing it before we leave for break. So I just wanted to name that. We're going to do as much as we can and figure it out from there. Okay, so flip myself around. Actually, can I change the size of this? There we go. Okay. Well, we're still learning how to use Screencastify. Okay, so to review, primary and secondary sources. So primary is going to be firsthand evidence. So it's direct evidence about the people, events, or phenomena that we're studying, and it's produced at the time of the event. So this is someone at the treaty signing, their experience, and what they a direct quote from them, which isn't always written down. We'll come back to that in a second. But examples might be a newspaper article from that event. And again, a direct quote from someone who was present. I'm like getting ahead of my own examples and saying them before I see that they're written here. Just so prepared, All right. Secondary is going to be secondhand evidence. So talking about something that happened. So it uses a primary source and describes it, interprets it, analyzes it, evaluates it. So this might be an encyclopedia entry or a textbook, but it's a description of an event written using the primary sources. So it would be like, if you were going to quote me in this video, you might be like, Miss Bedell said, a secondary source is a description of an event written using primary sources. That quote would be a primary source. But you writing about it and being like, when Miss Bedell said that, it reminded me of a time I heard a story from a friend of a friend of a friend. I'm getting a little bit lost in this example, but the point is when you're talking about something, it's generally secondary. When you are when you're sharing the exact experience, that's when it's primary. We're going to look at some more examples. If this is still feeling confusing, let me know. And we'll keep practicing. So now we're going to look through some of the articles of the Point Elliot Treaty, and we're going to think about whose need each one serves. So is this benefiting the Native people, or is it benefiting the U.S. government? And this is going to help us consider perspective and purpose, because it allows us to see, who might be contributing which parts, and how we know whether it's balanced and things like that. Okay, first article. The said tribes and bands of Indians hereby cede, relinquish, and convey to the United States all their right, title, and interest in and to the lands and country occupied by them. You might think this looks pretty familiar. It is super similar to the other treaty we looked at, the Medicine Creek Treaty. So there will be familiar language, like I know we talked about the word cede, which means to give up. And so some of this language will look familiar because it is pretty similar. So this article, whose need does it serve? It serves the U.S. government, because they are asking the Indians, the Native people, the indigenous people, to give up their land to the United States. So that is going to be serving the needs or the wants of the United States government. Okay, move myself over here. Article 2. There is, however, reserved for the present use and occupation of the tribes and bands the following tracts of land, it's like pieces of land, the amount of 2 sections or 1,280 acres, all which tracts shall be set apart and marked out for their exclusive use, nor shall any white man be permitted to reside upon the same without permission of the said tribes or bands and of the superintendent or agent. But if necessary for the public convenience, roads may be run through the said reserves, the Indians being compensated for any damage thereby done them. So, essentially, this is saying that there will be reservations that are exclusively preserved for the Native people, and that it will not be white settler land. So whose need does this serve? I think arguably it still could go, this could be debatable. I think the fact that the government is asking the Native people to live on just these small pieces of land, that is technically serving the U.S. government. But the fact that they are reserving the land for the Native people and saying, like, white settlers can't live there, that does also serve the Native people. So this is a little bit complicated, and I will take either as correct. Article 5. The right of taking fish at usual and accustomed grounds and stations is further secured to said Indians in common with all citizens of the territory, and erecting temporary houses for the purpose of curing, together with the privilege of hunting and gathering roots and berries on open and unclaimed lands, provided, however, that they shall not take shellfish from any bed staked or cultivated by citizens. So this is fishing rights. So this is saying that that the Native people can fish where they normally do. If they need to set up temporary houses, they can on any open and unclaimed lands, but they can't take shellfish from any areas that have already been claimed by white settlers. So whose need does this serve? I think this serves the needs of the Native people. And it's important to note that these rights are not, like, this was not like given to the Native people. This is a sovereign right reserved by the Native people for the Native people. And that's important to make sure that we understand. This is part of what makes it like between two sovereign nations, is that they were reserving this right that they've had since time immemorial, which means like forever, to be able to continue fishing where they always have. Okay, Article 12. The said tribes and bands further agree not to trade at Vancouver's Island or elsewhere out of the dominions of the United States, outside of the borders of the United States, nor shall foreign Indians be permitted to reside in their reservations without consent of the superintendent or agent. Also, this line is almost exactly the same in the Medicine Creek Treaty. But whose need does this serve, that the tribes are agreeing not to trade outside of the United States? Whose need does this serve? I think this is serving the United States government, because they're saying, like, you can trade with us, maybe, like, we'll help if you need, but you are not allowed to trade with other countries. So that's gonna serve the United States government. Okay. Article 13, to enable the said Indians to remove to and settle upon their aforesaid reservations and to clear, fence, and break up a sufficient quantity of land for cultivation, the United States further agree to pay the sum of $15,000 to be laid out and expended under the direction of the President and in such a manner as he shall approve. So this is saying that the U.S. agrees to pay the Native tribe to, like, sort of to pay them to resettle at the reservations. Whose need does this serve? I think arguably it serves the natives, that it is compensation for them going. I think it's still kind of serving the U.S. because it's not that much money, and they're like, the U.S. is still benefiting from the natives moving to the reservations. But I think the specific that they're being compensated serves the needs of the native. Just whether it actually, like, fulfills their need, I guess, is where my hesitation is. These are complicated, right? These are tricky. Okay. Article 14. The United States further agreed to establish at the General Agency for the District of Puget Sound, within 1 year from the ratification hereof, and to support for a period of 20 years, an agricultural and industrial school to be free to children, and to provide the school with a suitable instructor or instructors, and also to provide a smithy and carpenter's shop and furnish them with the necessary tools, employ a blacksmith, carpenter, and farmer for 20 years to instruct the Indians in their respective occupations, and the United States finally agreed to employ a physician. So this is that the U.S. is going to support for 20 years, that there's free education, that there's smithy and carpenter, so like to help with building, and blacksmith, carpenter, farmer, and doctor. So supporting with these specific jobs. Whose need does this serve, do you think? I think the US thinks that it's serving the Native people to do this. Again, I guess the tricky part with this one and the one before is like, is the need actually fulfilled? But in theory, this is supporting the Native people in theory, and so their interest is in mind. It's tricky to say whether this actually fulfills the need. So, yeah. Okay. So whose needs are more often served by this treaty? And again, we didn't look at every single article, as you saw from the numbers jumping around. But like overall, who do you think has more of their needs met by this treaty? And then how does that help us understand perspective and POV? So if we think about who had more of a say in this, because again, even if this, for example, this article is like supporting the needs of the natives, did the natives ask for these people to come work on the reservation? We don't know just looking at this, but it's something to consider. What we know about the way that the treaty signings went, bringing in that understanding too, it all contributes to our understanding of this time in history. All right, that is where we leave off. We will talk more about this during small group. And again, like what I want you to be thinking about is like how do we know whose story is being told? How do we know whose perspective is being highlighted? And when we see that there's an imbalance, how do we bring more perspectives to the table? So thanks for answering these questions and sticking along for the ride. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you later on.